Welcome to Reality, the official show of Atheists United. For the next 30 minutes, sit back, relax, and take a deep breath of the fresh air of reason. Our show will begin after this brief message. The battle between the anti-abortion forces and the pro-choice forces has evolved and escalated. Gone are the days when nuns and little old ladies would stand in front of family planning clinics and hand out pamphlets and flyers to passers-by. The little old ladies have given way to a younger, more violent crowd, a crowd that blockades clinics, that yells violent words at women who are seeking medical care, and some have even resorted to murder. In the face of all this, there have been some voices on the pro-choice crowd who scream only one word: retribution. Into all this, a rational, more peaceful voice must be heard, and such a voice I think I have found in the person of Bill Baird. Bill Baird is a man of peace who knows very little peace. The Reverend Paul Hill, the man who was responsible for shooting the doctor and his assistant and killing them in Pensacola, Florida, has said of Bill Baird, killing him is justifiable homicide. When Bill Baird came to California on a speaking tour, he came with heavy police security and armed guards. In order for me to secure an interview with Bill Baird, I had to meet him alone in a park in Thousand Oaks, California. I was able to talk with him for nearly an hour. The story he had to tell me was terrifying.
Who is to blame for last night's firebomb attack which left a Hempstead abortion clinic in ruins? According to the clinic's controversial owner, Bill Baird.
I think it's a national problem. I think if we go back in history, because you're so young, to realize that this violence just did not start. My clinic was firebombed in 1979. That's many years ago, where 50 patients were in the clinic. And the goal of this terrorist obviously was to destroy the lives of many people, not just one or two people. I remember Peter Birkin walking into my clinic with a gallon of gasoline and a torch. And he said nobody moved, that he was going to, quote, cleanse us by fire. The old biblical quote. And before anybody could move, he threw the gasoline and threw the torch into the room, in spite of the fact it was crowded with patients. The room ignited and the entire building was burned to the ground. So that's just only one case. Prior to the murders of these people, many acts of violence, which I consider firebombing part of it. But then we also had the direct murder of these two people. But remember who did the murders? This fellow, Reverend Paul Hill.
The murder of those two people by Reverend Paul Hill is not something that was not predictable. I debated that man on August 26th in Boston last year on WEZE radio. And during that 2-hour broadcast, he said, quote, killing Bill Baird and people like me is justifiable homicide. Then when I asked him, direct quote from the transcript, that if you came at me with a gun, do I have a right to defend myself? And what do you think his answer was? No. Absolutely not. He said, it is his job to bring, quote, murderers like me to justice. Therefore, I have no right to defend myself.
I know I began in 1963 when a woman died in my arms with an 8-inch piece of wire coat hanger embedded in her uterus.
I think the thing that probably galvanized my action these many years is seeing a woman stagger down a hallway of a hospital screaming in agony, seeing blood pouring out of her body with an 8-inch piece of wire coat hanger embedded in her uterus, and holding her as she slumped to the ground, noting her concern for the 9 children she had, and knowing that by law here in New York State she could not have birth control nor abortion help.
Ordinary coat hanger. You know the game that was played with poor women? If you take a piece of coat hanger, wrap it with adhesive tape, and scratch the wall of the uterus to induce bleeding. The goal was not to do the abortion, as some of you thought. The goal was to scratch the wall so if you're bleeding, you can rush to a sympathetic doctor and say to save her life, they had to do what was called a DNC, dilatation curettage. But in the case of that black mother who died in my arms, who didn't know her uterus was the size of my fist and half an inch thick, she pushed it through the wall of the uterus into her bowel, and she hemorrhaged to death.
Crucially important for younger people to understand that when birth control was illegal, people suffered and they got pregnant when they did not have gotten pregnant. Then there were 2 other court cases that dealt with the rights of teenagers. A law was passed in Massachusetts that said if you're a teenager, you need the written permission of your mother and your father or a judge. Now think back when you were 16 or 17. How many kids did you know could say, Mom, I'm having intercourse, would you sign here? And then you go to your father and say, Dad, would you sign? And if that doesn't work, sue your parents. Bring them into a courtroom. So my argument was basically simple. It said, if you want a baby, do you need anyone's permission? The answer is no. If you want to be treated for drug addiction, you don't need anyone's permission. So if you want to be treated for venereal disease, you don't need anyone's permission. So the court basically agreed with me, and they said the Bill of Rights is not for adults only. Brand new law now that's going across the country basically says that, quote, if you're a mature minor, you need no one's permission. Do you know what a mature minor is? Because I don't. So if you're a mature minor, you don't need anyone's permission. But if you're immature, you don't have the abortion, you have a baby. But once you have a baby, you're emancipated. Then you don't need permission to have the abortion once you have a child. So this kind of insanity is out there, and young people just sit there and they watch their freedom go down the tubes. Or when I lecture at a campus, I'll say, well, Baird, the fight is over, we've won. Let me assure you, states like North Dakota, there's only one doctor who's doing abortions. Mississippi, one doctor. Many clinics are closed now because of the fear of being assassinated. So we have a long way to go before freedom is really achieved. So I set up the nation's first abortion clinic. Totally illegal. Are you old enough to remember shows like Alan Burke or Joe Pine, which came out of this state? I appeared on national broadcast 30 years ago and said, if you're pregnant, I will help you. Please don't use a coat hanger or don't use a knitting needle. And I think the fact that I personally saw so much suffering, so much anguish that people had to endure, that I decided that somebody ought to fight these laws. And it's imperative that the record be set straight. These clippings that I have here, or I hope you'll be able to film later, clearly document. In 1963, there was no NOW, no National Organization for Women. Planned Parenthood was bitterly opposed to abortion in spite of all their rhetoric and all their falsehoods. It's important that the public know that they were one of the chief architects who I had to fight in the early 60s. They were totally opposed to abortion and totally opposed to what I was fighting for. They thought I was, quote, too radical. You will see their bulletin saying abortion is, quote, takes the life of a child. So that was their rhetoric. The case called Baird v. Eisenstadt. Remember I told you I was jailed for, sentenced to prison for 3 months? Right. That case is probably one of the most important cases for the civil rights of we the people. And yet, in spite of the importance today, in fact, you've got a fellow here by the name of O.J. Simpson, right, that's on trial, where they broke into his home. One of the arguments that they used in his defense was my case on the right of privacy called Baird versus Eisenstadt, where the court had ruled that we have a right of privacy. Yet Planned Parenthood, in their literature, which is on this desk, said, quote, there's nothing to be gained by the Baird case. The only way to change the law is through legislation. And where that tension came from, I never knew this, but there is something called territorial rights. People who are, quote, rich corporation leaders, like Planned Parenthood, worth $440 million, really didn't want somebody coming into their territory to challenge the law. So not only did I have to fight the anti-abortion people, but I had to fight the people on my side. You were at my speech the other day. You heard me show the headline in the New York Times, April the 14th, last year. Now, that isn't 100 years ago, and the New York Times is a pretty liberal paper. Yet the headline was called Bill Baird, the Devil of Abortion, where they quoted Betty Friedan of this, saying that, in effect, I was a CIA agent. Now, to call me a CIA agent is nonsense. I wouldn't even know one if I saw one. Robin Morgan, the editor of Ms. Magazine. I'm sure you're familiar with her, one of the so-called renowned feminists believing in equality, which is nonsense. Here's a woman who said that I'm in this movement so women will go to bed with me. As I said to the audience the other night, if I want to take a woman to bed with me, that's my goal. Would I have to go to jail 8 times? Would I have to be shot at, firebombed, be $200,000 in debt, be separated from a family who I treasure because I want to take somebody to bed with me? But that's their way of trying to invalidate the work you've done.
And I don't know how well you can see this in the back, but this is sort of my trademark. Showing you this is what I had showed at different universities, would put me in prison 8 times in 5 states. In fact, I was trying to show you this. I held it earlier. Vice Squad nabbed Boston University birth control speaker. This is way back in 1967. The crime, if you look carefully, it shows my showing this identical board that I'm showing you. That the police contended that if you looked at this, you might get ideas about sex.
You won't have to involve the witness. All right. You are now under arrest. I am Captain Lefkowitz of the Freehold Police Department.
Yeah. This is in New York. Newsday is a large paper in New York. I gave a speech to several hundred people, as I've done all over the United States. I saw 5 grumpy-looking men in the front row in plain clothes, but I didn't pay any attention to them because I just thought they would be my usual harassers of right to lifers. Suddenly, at the end of my speech, as quick as a wink, they got behind me, threw me to the floor, and all of a sudden they had a badge on. I never saw them put the badge on. And as this headline says, abortion advocate jailed, an infant was in the audience. The mother of this little baby, a 14-month baby, was handcuffed. If I turn this page, you see the mother and I are handcuffed. The headline says, Suffolk police say Baird's talk endangered the welfare of the infant. And the argument by the police department was, and they were all Catholics, by the way, 5 Catholic police officers, was that by showing a diaphragm, anyone under 18 would get sexual ideas. The only one under 18 was a 14-month baby. And as insane as this may sound to you, the mother and I were put in jail, fingerprinted, handcuffed. We had to face a 3-year jail term. We had to go on trial.
All right.
My little daughter, Dawn, was told with letters that she would be put to death by Christians. I showed the letters to the FBI. The FBI said, Baird, don't worry. Whoever writes like this are crazy. They'll do nothing. Who do you think usually pulls a trigger on a gun? It's usually somebody who's emotionally ill. So with that fear in my heart, we took my entire family, moved them 400 miles away to a New England farm town where I thought they'd be safe and alive, which they have been. What I never counted on, and this is my own foolishness, they became like the farm people. They're deeply religious. They carry their Christian crosses on their chest. I remember my daughter saying to me, quote, do I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, quote unquote. I don't want any part of any Lord and Saviors. I really don't. I don't know anything if there are gods or no gods. I'm never going to be smart enough to know that. What I do know is this. I'm on this earth for X number of years. I've lived my life as decently as I know how. Doesn't mean I haven't screwed up. I'm sure I have. But I've lived my life trying to love people, to help people, and to give people, I think, in a way as best as I can, access to their own freedom, to their own rights, and to show by example that you don't have to be powerful or politically connected or to be rich. I mean, the American Humanists is the first time in my life I've ever had any kind of organizational backing, and I can learn a lot from them.
I take a great deal of honor and pride that I am a humanist and a free thinker. I don't need any religion to tell me what to believe or what to do. They're hardly the guardian of morality. Look at their history. Look at the number of people who've been put to death in the name of God. Look at Ireland, where Catholic kills Protestant in the name of God. In Israel, where Muslim kills Jew, vice versa in the name of God. Keep your gods. My belief is a simple one. Love one another. Care about one another. Give your life to protect and help and care for each other.
My name is Fred Edwards. I'm Executive Director of the American Humanist Association. Well, Bill Baird's a fighter for freedom, and we in the American Humanist Association are defenders of human rights, particularly when the human rights that we're defending come under attack by extremist religious advocates. And Bill Baird is one of those freedom fighters who understands that, who understands the role that religious fundamentalism plays in depriving people of their rights, not only in the United States but abroad. Humanism is a philosophy that is, you might say, probably the best way to put it would be the way Bertrand Russell put it, that the good life is the life motivated by love and guided by knowledge. In short, that we start with human compassion as our motivation, and we use reason as our main modus operandi, if you will, for getting from here to there, for fighting for human rights, for building a better society. We're not looking for help from above, from beyond. We're not looking for a better life after death. Our focus is here, it's now, and if this world is going to be better, we've got to do it for ourselves. So we tend to be agnostic or atheistic, and we tend to be focused on making life better through human action. We don't believe in some moral power or moral force beyond us. Human beings are the creators of morality, and human beings are the enforcers of morality. And so moral values are derived from human need and interest, and that our ethics are situational and consequential. We look at the situation and the whole ramifications, and we look at the consequences. What's going to happen? What's the likely outcome? And so therefore we're not impressed by moral values that say that something is higher and better and more important than what is good for human beings. Well, we humanists look at the whole abortion question in the way we look at most questions. We don't try to draw clear lines of demarcation or come up with absolute rules. So we'll say that the closer to the moment of birth you come, the more extenuating circumstances you need to justify an abortion, which is sort of the way the Roe v. Wade decision worked it out. And that the further away you are from the moment of birth, the easier it is to justify such a decision. So we're not trying to draw a line, well, here it's this and here it's that. So on the one hand, an acorn is not an oak tree, an egg is not a baby, even a fertilized egg is not a baby. On the other hand, you don't need to work with those definitions, because if you want to look for the beginning of human life, you have to go back millions of years to the first life on the planet. So when does it all begin? Everything is a continuum. And so what you do is you look at all of the extenuating circumstances and how they fit into that continuum. And then you try to make the best decision of which you are capable based on the evidence available, based on your reason, your compassion, and what is going to work to make society better.
Why do you think all of a sudden you're seeing the murder of Dr. Gunn in Pensacola, Florida? A friend of mine, Dr. George Tiller, was shot in his arm in Kansas City last year. 2 people were assassinated, again in Pensacola. Why do you think suddenly this burst of violence? Think with me. If you can push this nation to the right and say, God, look how horrible, as one of you said, how horrible these murders. But let's look at Operation Rescue now. Gee, all they do is blockade clinics. That's not so bad. They're really moderate people. Do you hear me? If you push your direction to focus on the murders, and now you're not looking at the fact that they're going into clinics and beating up people, or indeed if they go to clinics and they copy down the license plates of your patients, or they harass them at home, that's nowhere near as far out as killing somebody.
Well, since I've run a clinic for over 30 years, and now, by the way, I might point out it's now closed. We were evicted in January because I didn't have sufficient money to continue. And that's a sad note, because the women's movement has been very effective in stopping me from appearing on campuses where I used to be with Ralph Nader, myself, and Dick Gregory were the 3 top speakers in the early 60s on college campuses. And now that door has been closed to me because men cannot be sensitive. And every time I hear that, I cringe, because we need men and women working together. But the issue about abortion clinics, where I used to serve on the board of directors of the ACLU, and even try to help them understand what free speech really is and what it really isn't when it comes to this issue. If you can imagine people picketing outside a clinic, and you're being on the examining table, you as a male, seeking the services of a doctor for a vasectomy, where you have a razor-sharp scalpel next to the scrotum and about to make that incision, and you suddenly jump because you hear the term murderer or killer or devil, or somebody pounds on the door trying to break in, or the doctor should jump, and we castrate you. There's nobody in their right mind would say to you, dear Dwaine, this was free speech. That would be creating a horrible atmosphere for medical care.
I actually originally come from California, but we have in the American Humanist Association 75 chapters nationwide, and a number of our chapters are located here in California. So I'm out here to address some of our groups. I'm out here to address Unitarian Universalist congregations, many members of whom are humanists. And so is Bill Baird. We're out here kind of doing the same thing. And sometimes we do it together, and sometimes we do it separately. But we're out here on a lecture tour, jointly and separately. And we're promoting human rights and showing ways in which we can effectively challenge the religious right and their campaigns to take away our liberties in the area of freedom to read, censorship. For example, Muslim fundamentalists are now threatening the life of Taslima Nasreen, who is a author in Bangladesh, who has declared herself a humanist and who has written a novel critical of religion, and so now she's in the same boat as Salman Rushdie. And so we're talking about these kinds of things. We're talking about sexual freedom. We're talking about human rights in general and civil liberties. We support the separation of church and state because these are critical issues in our time. When there are forces that want to take away our liberties, someone has to stand up and defend them and point the finger at one of the major sources of the loss of liberty, which is religious extremism.
Well, Dwaine, I've been hearing this for a number of years now. The wildest part was this group called ACT UP, you know, the gay rights group, who went inside St. Patrick's Cathedral and were disruptive within that church, and I was invited to go in there, and I would not. There are those allies of mine who blockaded Lincoln Tunnel, and I tried to tell them I wouldn't be a partner to that either. See, I don't think we have a right to interfere with somebody else's freedom, whatever that freedom may be. But I can tell you this. One side can no longer coexist with it forever being firebombed. Remember, we've had over 200 firebombings. I go out publicly. You saw I was under heavy police guard the other day. We've been shot at. We've been, in fact, murdered. Some of our people have been kidnapped. Dr. Savalos in Granite City, Illinois, was kidnapped a few years back and tortured, by the way, along with his wife. We've endured all that. So common sense has to tell you that maybe what Reagan said, the only thing he ever said years ago that made sense, that preemptive strikes against terrorists would make sense. In other words, if we started to firebomb anti-abortion churches, if we started to terrorize cardinals, think with me, if 3 cardinals were murdered, as 3 doctors were murdered, or 3 people were pro-choice people were murdered, we'd have an absolute state of anarchy in this country. I don't want to ever see that happen. So that's why I keep pleading with the people who are younger than myself, who are just coming into the movement, that you never achieve anything with violence. What you do is outfox, outthink, outsmart the people who you're fighting, but never to resort to their level. I'll give you a quick story. I don't know if you remember this. A fellow by the name of, a woman by the name of Nancy Klein, who was in a coma a couple of years ago, near death. She was at North Shore Hospital, and her husband and her family called me and said, Bill Baird, they won't let us have the abortion. Would you help us? And all of a sudden, I agreed I would help them. All of a sudden, we got sued by 3 Catholic right-to-lifers. They sued to be guardian of her fetus, guardian of her life, guardian of her property. We went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. They made a movie on this on CBS called Absolute Strangers. So that's how powerful this story was. A couple weeks ago, the man who was behind this, and after we had won the lawsuit, did the abortion, and she came out of the coma. This fellow, John Short, died only a couple weeks ago. I read about it. I called his wife, and I gave my condolences. She said, Newsday wrote an editorial, which is a Long Island paper, that was not very friendly toward her husband. Would I write a letter about him, saying something decent? And I said I would. I wrote a letter to Newsday, and they printed it. And the letter basically said, I disagree with John Short, everything that he stood for, but I could respect him as a person who thought he fought the right battle. I cannot tell you, Dwaine, the number of calls I got from pro-choice people scolding me, said, you're a traitor. How dare you give aid and comfort to your enemy? Because don't you understand, never let this fight be reduced to people. Let it be reduced to the level of ideas. I will fight the message, not the messenger. So I would say to any pro-choice person, don't attack people as people. Attack the message and let the goal be the freedom of all people. The opposition can say whatever they want, but don't make it a law. And don't use violence to make it the law for all people by ruling by terror.
This morning's paper headline said, Mississippi doctor, one doctor in that area has been threatened with his life taken, and he's the only one who does abortions. The state of Nebraska, there's only one doctor left who does abortions. One. Do you hear my message? Even if you have it legal, and you can't find a doctor to do it, then what good is it being legal?
My family and I have been apart for over 22 years. It's been very painful. And it's the price you pay, though. See, when the women's movement tells me, get out of their movement, I'm of no validity. I've given up my freedom, jailed 8 times, try to get a loan. Fred Edwards goes to a bank. He can get any kind of money he wants. I go to a bank, and they say, if you've ever been in prison, put down 8 times, they don't want to know you, okay? So I don't have the same rights that you do. And basically a decent person, no matter what they tell you. If people say to you, am I scared? Sure, I'm scared. I'm going to San Diego now to give a speech. Will I come out of there alive? I have no way of knowing it. The other night when I spoke at the Unitarian Fellowship in San Jose, we got a call, not to me, but the people who invited me. San Jose police had told them that I would be shot or get hurt. They assigned 3 police officers to protect my life. But you know how they did it? They put them on bicycles. In my whole life, I've never seen a cop on a bicycle. So I can imagine if somebody shot me, and the night that you heard me speak, you saw there were 4 police officers. You have an idea, you saw I read not a speech, I never read a speech. I basically know the stuff I'm going to say. Same message I've been given for 31 years. But you think it's not scary to look at that audience and not know if somebody suddenly whips out a gun and you're dead. And what have you done wrong? Is basically say that I believe in your freedom. So to sum it basically up, a man who I love, a man named Abby Hoffman, a dear friend of mine, used to pay my rent, felt exactly the way I feel today. I've told this story many times. Flat broke, rejected by society, as I am, rejected by people in his movement. They said he was over the hill. They haven't said that to me yet. They just said I'm the wrong sex. I'm sexually incorrect, is what they're saying. The family really doesn't have very much to do with you. And I remember saying to him, hugging him in the street, please don't let them break you, because any one of us can be broken. Now, it's not like what you see these John Wayne movies that somebody punches you in the face and says, shucks, that blood doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts when people want you dead. But then your spirit says you go on. And I said, go on, don't let them break you. And you know what happened to Abby? He took his life. So did another man by the name of Mitch Snyder, who fought so well for the homeless. They broke him also. And of course, I'm dangerously close to that. I'm honest in saying that. I'm dangerously close. And people say, well, you're weak. Dwaine, if you have enough courage to face what you're afraid of, and enough courage to say, yeah, I'm badly scarred, but I still have the courage to go on, I will still carry that picket sign. I will still go to San Diego. I will still go and fight the best battle I know how.
Their fate, not the church, not the state. Women must decide their fate.
The Atheist Alliance has societies in all of the cities listed on your screen. You can access any of them by checking the phone book for the one in your area, or by contacting the Atheist Alliance at the address or phone number at the end of this current roster. Note the Atheist Outreach, which has been organized to serve those without an organization in their area. We can also assist you in organizing your own atheist society. Contact us at the Atheist Alliance, Post Office Box 6261, Minneapolis, Minnesota, zip 55406. Or call area code 612-588-7031. This program is a product of ATVOP, the Atheist TV Outreach Project. We invite your participation as part of the ATVOP team on any level, as distributor, producer, or any of a myriad of other activities, from writing scripts, talent scouting, videotaping, and so on. Complete information and mentoring is available from the Alliance address on your screen.